Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Steel News Podcast. I'm Brennan with the Steel News alongside Jay with Steelers Loyalty. Jay, the Steelers got a big win over the Denver Broncos, winning 13-6 in their Week 2 matchup. Jay, what can you tell me you saw from that game?
hmm it looked like a good team win to me, and it was a defensive game. I thought maybe the Steelers would pull away and it wouldn't be so close, but that's kind of how the team is built right now, and the offense just isn't making mistakes. They're playing into the strength of the defense, but weeks 1 and 2, you had basically your backup quarterback. I mean, they were originally planning on Russ starting, and he goes on the road for the first 2 weeks and wins both games, and we're 2-0. I'll take that all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned not turning the ball over, and that's what the Steelers are looking for. But they're trying to find a spark in offense. But you mentioned that defense for the Steelers. Is there a guy from Week 2 that really impressed you for the Steelers, or maybe a couple of guys you thought had a really good defensive performance?
There were a couple of guys, I mean, obviously Watt, as always, he's great. Joey Porter Jr. I thought had a good game. He only allowed one catch in coverage, and then I think in the slot also we're seeing a rookie emerge who people were pointing out in the preseason. I think Beanie Bishop is finding a spot in the secondary as well.
Yeah, like what you said about the Steelers and Beanie Bishop. He's a guy I think that's definitely been very impressive. And again, the Steelers have struggled at the corner position, but it looks like they might have found a couple of guys. I mean, I'm sure you remember Corey Trice, his rookie season, tore his ACL before the season started, wasn't able to play. Then he had that big red zone interception for the Steelers after they gave up a big play, I believe, to Reynolds on the Broncos. And another guy too I want to bring up, Jay, is Deshaun Elliott. He had 9 total tackles and he was all over the field. What did you like from him in Week 2?
Yeah, like I said last week, I thought he was one of the more underrated signings. He's good in coverage. He can tackle. He's just a solid safety, and I think he complements Minka Fitzpatrick very well. And I think tackling is also a great ability to have.
Yeah, and the Steelers have struggled, especially, in the last couple of years against the running game. How do you feel like the Steelers did in Week 2? I mean, the Broncos, they used Bo Nix. He had a couple of carries, just 4 yards, the quarterback for 25 yards. But you look at Javonte Williams, 11 carries for 17 yards, and that's their starting running back. So I think that front seven for the Steelers got home, Jay, and stopped that running game.
Yeah, they look good. The depth looks good right now for sure. You've got Cameron Hayward now fully healthy, and I think you're seeing Keanu Benton, who was a rookie last year, emerge as well.
Yeah, and it feels like all the pieces are coming together for the Steelers. They got Corey Trice, who didn't get to play his rookie year and now is back. They got Dante Jackson in that secondary, Deshaun Elliott, who's been a stud, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson. I mean, they have such guys who are underrated, and some. I mean, obviously Patrick Queen, people know who's really good, but like you said, Deshaun Elliott, they got these guys who could step up and make big plays happen. And I mean, the story of the Steelers has always been defense. They always win games with their defense and their running game too, Jay. You look at the Steelers rushing game, Najee Harris had 17 rushes for 69 yards. Warren had 9 carries for 42 yards. The running game didn't get going as well as I would have liked for the Steelers, but I thought it wasn't too bad. How did you feel about the Steelers offense running game specifically?
I didn't think it was anything great, but I thought it was good enough. There are still some moving pieces up on the offensive line, as we saw with Broderick Jones, who got benched kind of early on in that game. But but I like what I'm seeing overall. I think two of the young guys that have done really well were Zach Frazier and Troy Fautanu, who looked really good. So I think the pieces will be there come the end of the year in playoff time when we really need to run the ball.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I really like Zach Frazier and Troy. I mean, they're both rookies and they're making their impact felt. And I think another guy too, the Steelers can obviously think about using at some point is I think it's Mason McCormick, the guard that we drafted in the 4th round.
hmm
I mean, obviously they've been Isaac Samalu's been out for a little while and they've been relying on Spencer Anderson, if I'm correct, number 74 for the Steelers. But how do you feel about Dan Moore getting reps after Broderick Jones, got benched and they leaned on him? Do you think he played a good game? Do you think, he struggled? Like, what did you see from him?
From Broderick?
or from Dan Moore?
Oh no, I thought Dan Moore did fine filling in. You know, he's a good depth piece, but I was a little surprised to see Broderick Jones get benched. I mean, um, he had the three penalties and whatever. I don't know if something was said after that, maybe on the sideline that got him benched. But I was also a little surprised because he was working on the right side. I thought maybe he would be at left tackle where he's more natural and Fautanu's on the right. But I mean, that's how it played out.
Yeah, and I would like to see the Steelers, move Broderick to left tackle. That's his spot, and Troy at right tackle. I want to see how they play at their college position. I mean, I think the Steelers in the past have drafted guys like Kendrick Green, who's a guard, and they wanted him to play center. And I just want to see Steelers play the offensive lineman they draft at the exact spot they like to play and are comfortable with. But obviously, you got to be like a Swiss Army knife and be able to move around the offensive line, and that's what Mike Tomlin wants from this offense. But Jay, we talked about this big win for the Steelers. George Pickens had a catch that was really awesome, but again, it was a Broderick Jones holding penalty, I believe. How do you feel about Broderick Jones's play and the penalties he committed?
You know, obviously it was just one series that really wasn't good, and I don't know. Sometimes it snowballs, it gets in his head, whatever stuff is said on the sideline. I don't know, but also, like I said, I was kind of surprised that it happened on the right side of the offensive line, and he didn't really get a chance to play at left.
Yeah, I think too it's not too fair of a to assess his play. I mean, obviously he struggled. Mike Tomlin wants to keep, the next man up mentality going, and it keeps iron sharpens iron. So it's good to have competition within the offensive line, and even at quarterback. I mean, we have Russ. It looks like he's getting healthier and healthier, but it looks like the Steelers are going to lean towards Justin Fields to be the starter against the Chargers for their home opener. Jay, how do you feel about Fields starting for Week 3?
You know, who knows if they're just trying to be conservative with the Russ injury or they're just trying to play the hot hand right now. Or it could be both. You know, I'm not really sure what's going on with Russ because we're in week three, but maybe the team just wants to ride with the hot hand for right now. But I do think Russ is probably QB1 when he's healthy. I mean, I don't know that Justin Fields has locked up the job, but because they're winning, it gives them flexibility now to say, hey, Russ, you can wait until you're fully healthy.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, especially with a veteran. I mean, you look at the Falcons, Kirk Cousins, he's been playing, and I think he had a quote where he said he feels pretty good, but he's not 100%. If I'm not mistaken, he said something along those lines. And obviously, we saw at week 1, he struggled against the Steelers pass rush when he was trying to pass the ball and whatnot. But I'm really impressed with the Steelers. And another guy, too. I mean, you look at Pat Fryman with 4 catches, 39 yards, and he's had some great blocks. How do you think the Steelers get that passing game open up even more? I mean, I know they have Roman Wilson, who's injured and obviously hasn't been able to show what he can do, third round draft pick from Michigan. Um, but yeah, how do you think the Steelers get that passing game open more and be more explosive on offense and find the red zone and get in the end zone for a touchdown?
You know, part of it might be also getting the running game going to its fullest potential and then doing it off play actions and bootlegs and stuff like that. You know, I feel like they've done a good job giving George Pickens chances. You know, some plays early on have been wiped because of penalties, but he's gotten chances. I think you just need to continue to be efficient, use the tight ends. I mean, they finally used Darnell Washington and he's got a touchdown. So just find the open target and continue to be efficient.
And you mentioned Jay Darnell Washington. He's a guy I want to see utilized in that passing game in the red zone. Obviously, he can block. He's like an extra lineman. This dude's what, 6'7", 6'9". He's really tall. He's a big body guy from Georgia that the Steelers definitely should utilize more. And he had 1 catch for 5 yards in that receiving touchdown, like you said, first touchdown of the season. But another interesting fact is in the NFL this year, there's been more field goals than touchdowns. And I believe that's the first time in a long time that's happened, or the first time ever, or something along those lines. But Jay, how do you think, the Steelers, they struggle to get into the end zone against the Chargers this week? It's going to be a tough task. That's going to be, I think, the best opponent they probably played so far. Granted, the Falcons didn't play up to expectations. Broncos are a weaker team. How do you think the Steelers play against that Chargers defense? And what's the key to success to winning that game?
You know, I think the key is just what it's always been is to at least first, don't make mistakes because you know you've got the defense to support you, so don't make mistakes. But then I think it starts next with getting the running game going, and because that will just help Fields in the offense, and then it opens up the pass, the bootlegs, and you know he's also got mobility and he can run, so it opens up a lot of different things.
Yeah, and like you were saying, you gotta get that running game going. That's the Steelers' identity, and I'd like to see bootlegs, play action passes against the Chargers. But I'm looking here at the Steelers, their offensive stats in the entire league. They're 29th in passing yards per game with 136 and a half. They're 12th in rushing yards, 139 yards rushing yards per game, and they're 28th in total yards per game. So it looks like the passing game and the total yards per game has been an issue for the offense. Granted, they are 2-0, but obviously as the season goes on, we start playing the AFC North. I don't think this formula of winning we have is going to be sustainable, obviously, because the defense gets colder out, injuries happen and whatnot. So how do the Steelers, they're struggling with the passing game, and you mentioned getting that running game going. They're 12th in the league in rushing yards per game. Is there a guy you'd like to see the Steelers maybe try to throw the ball to more? I mean, I know George Pickens is their guy, but he's probably going to be getting double team looks. Is there another guy you think we could get in the passing game utilized more? I mean, is Pat Freiermuth someone who comes to mind, or anyone else you like?
Yeah, I like both tight ends, Freiermuth and Washington. I mean, we saw what Darnell Washington could do like against the Broncos, but yeah, I also think just pieces will come into place as the season goes on. You know, you're going to have Roman Wilson come back at receiver, and he could be a playmaker. You're going to get pieces back on the offensive line with Isaac Seumalo, and then maybe Russ comes back and he's the starter. So I think there will be pieces coming in to support the team as the year goes on.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, Jay. And this week 3 matchup, the Steelers, again, they play out Sunday, their home opener against the Los Angeles Chargers. Is there a guy on the Chargers the Steelers should be watching out for? I know they have one of the running backs is the lead rusher in the entire NFL so far through 2 weeks. And obviously, Jim Harbaugh, a great head coach. He's back coaching in the NFL. Herbert's a good guy, but he's been off to a slow start this year. So I think it's going to be a rushing game between the Steelers and the Chargers. What should the Steelers do in terms of defense to prepare for that Chargers offense?
You know, I think it just needs to be what it's always been. The secondary needs to be good, and then that will set things up for the pass rush. I think that's the strength of the team. TJ Watt, actually, he's going to be going against rookie offensive tackle Joe Alt, who was a high pick in the draft. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think the key is just for the secondary to hold up and set it up for the pass rush and get to Herbert and make him uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's the Steelers when they play really physical football and they get their presence felt. That's when they have a successful formula in winning games. Now, Jay, after week 3, the Steelers travel to Indianapolis at 1 o'clock on Sunday, September 29th against the 0-2 Colts. How do you feel about that game? You think the Steelers can go in there and get a win? Or do you think the Steelers maybe drop a game there? What do you expect to see the week after the Chargers, week 4 for the Steelers?
You know, it's also hard to say because there are so many moving pieces right now. Like I don't know what the quarterback situation, everything's going to look like, but I think the team gets the win because Anthony Richardson, he didn't start a lot last year. He still doesn't have a lot of experience, so I think Mike Tomlin, he's an experienced enough coach where he's going to be able to outmatch him and get the win.
Yeah, and two, the Colts are a team that they had some close games. They had some tough losses early on. And I mean, after that, week 5, the Steelers play the Cowboys. And they're an interesting team, Jay. They either beat their opponent by a lot. They beat the Browns by, I think, 16 points it was. I think they won 33-17 or something along those lines. And I mean, the Cowboys are hit or miss every week, I feel like. You think the
Mhm.
Steelers could beat the Cowboys at home?
I think they can, yeah, like you said, hit or miss, but those Steelers Cowboys games are usually close, so you don't know how those go, and I don't know. I think Russ might be back by then, so I mean,
Yeah,
I'd pick the Steelers right now, but it's hard to say with all the moving pieces.
it is. It's tough. I mean, as of right now in our first few games, Jay, the only game I think the Steelers lose before the bye, the only team that's really, really scares me is the Jets just because of their defense. And Brees
Mhm.
Hall, of course, is a really good running back. And Aaron Rodgers looked pretty decent and solid after coming off that injury he had last year. So, and I'm pretty excited. I'm going to that game, so I'll make sure to be really loud when the Steelers are on defense, and whatnot. It's always a great atmosphere. But yeah, I think like we were saying before, the Steelers' success is running the football, getting that running game going. Najee Harris has been a guy, they've been giving him more rushes, more carries. Would you like to see the Steelers maybe try to use Jalen Warren in some of these games more and see if he can, be utilized, or you think they should still stick with their workhorse Najee Harris?
For now, I would actually just say no because Jalen Warren was dealing with the hamstring injury. I think that's probably the reason why Najee Harris is getting more of the carries. I think they're just trying to ease Warren back in a little more slowly. But by the time it's playoff time, we're getting closer and the weather's bad and we need to run it. I think it's a 50-50 split.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it better. That injury Warren had was obviously tough, and there's no sense in having him get too many reps early on. But you still want to get him those reps so he's not uncomfortable coming back. Obviously, you can't. You got to be warmed up, but you don't want to overdo it or overdo the workload, if you will, as you would say. But and I think another interesting thing too, Jay, is the Steelers still have Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson. I mean, Calvin Austin's a really, really fast guy. Would you maybe like to see the Steelers try to do some jet sweeps with him? I mean, I know that's a Steelers classic. Not that they have Matt Canada, but would you like to see them maybe try to use Calvin Austin a little bit more?
Yeah, like you said, either on running plays or deep downfield if we're able to set up the passing game. You've got George Pickens who's already a deep threat and he can take the middle of the field. So maybe you get two guys going deep and maybe you can give Calvin Austin some chances too.
Yeah, he's a really, really fast guy from Memphis, and he's been a phenomenal player for the Steelers. I mean, he's really fast. It can do a lot of things. It's just that offensive line, if they can't, get their pass blocking going better, then it's going to be tougher for the Steelers to try to get the ball down the field. And with the Steelers' offensive struggles, Jay, Chris Boswell has 8 field goals through his first 2 games. Against the Broncos, he was 2 for 2 on field goals. He made a 53-yarder. How do you feel about Chris Boswell so far this season?
He's been money, he's been perfect, and I think it's very important for us, when you're playing these tighter games with smaller leads and you're relying on the defense, it's very important. So he's been one of the most valuable pieces, I think, to this team.
Yeah, he's for sure, in my opinion, been the best player this season for the Steelers. He literally is the reason we have done so great. Obviously, the defense, TJ Watt's the best player on the team, but Chris Boswell, just the stats, he's been there. He's been automatic. He's been money when his number's been called. And another guy too on special teams. You have Cameron Johnston who goes down with the season-ending injury in week 1. Now the Steelers have Corliss Waitman, who had 8 punts for an average of 53 yards. And Jay, he had a 58 long yard punt, was his longest punt. How do you feel about him stepping up and being the punter for the Steelers?
Yeah, I read that stat. He averaged 53 yards per punt. I thought he looked really good, and I was actually very impressed that he exceeded my expectations after we lost Cameron Johnston. I thought we were going to be hurting at punter, but I thought he did really well.
Yeah, and I think too, he showed that he could be the Steelers punter for the season. I mean, he's very solid. 53 yards a punt, we'll take that. That's, we like you said, we win off of defense and a hard-nosed running game. So getting good field position is crucial for the Steelers team. And Jay, my last question here before we sign off here. How do you feel about Cameron Hayward? He signed that contract. People thought it was a little bit of an overpay, but he's kind of showed out these first 2 weeks. How do you feel about his play?
I think he's been really good, and he's proving that maybe it was just an off year last year. He wasn't fully healthy, but because he overall, I think he's looked better with age. When you zoom out and look at maybe like the last 5 years, I think last year was just an off year. So, and the team knows what they have in him being a reliable captain. So I think it's a good contract extension to have that veteran base around.
Yeah, and he's the captain of this team. Ben passed the torch down to him to be the team captain, and he's done a phenomenal job. He's a great player, Hall of Famer without a doubt. He's a great guy, and I guess Jay, I have one more thing before we go here. Score predictions for the Steelers and Chargers on Sunday. Who do you got, and what's your score?
Hmm. I'm gonna say 20-13 Steelers. I think it'll be close, defensive, same as usual.
You think it'll be a close? You think we get some more touchdowns then?
Um, Yeah, I'm gonna say two touchdowns and two field goals.
I like that. I would like every week maybe we score one more touchdown than the week before. That'd be
Hmm.
improvement, right?
Yeah.
Would make the team a lot better. I like that. I think it's going to be a hard game for both teams. I mean, the Steelers' offense has just struggled to get started with the passing game, and I mean, obviously they haven't turned the ball over, but it's been tough with the offensive line. I think it'll be close, and I like that. I got the Steelers 22-15 against the Chargers. I think it's just going to be a weird scoring game, but I think the Steelers take care of business and get it done. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in to this podcast. It's been Brennan with the Steel News alongside Jay with Steelers Loyalty. We're going to be uploading videos every Wednesday, so stay tuned and go Steelers.